Check 1, 2, test. Check 1. Test 1, 2. Check 1. Test 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. All right, so thought I'd pause that. For some reason, I change the settings on my mouse, but it does not always do what I tell it to do. So, sorry, just a second. Drop my earbud on the floor. That's not helpful for anybody. I also need to get that picked up in case, well, wouldn't happen right away, but I also dropped a battery earlier I could not find, but if my mom comes to visit, she brings her dog, and I don't want that battery down there for her dog to be able to eat. That would not be a welcome thing to do. So I hope you are having a great, great day. Whether you're watching this now or you're watching it later or you're joining me, I hope it's a great day for you. We are going to look at Luke 2, and the main part I'm going to look at actually starts at verse 21, but I feel like I should go ahead and read more of it before we get into that section, just because it is probably familiar to you, and you'll think, well, why didn't we read that other part? So I'll probably read through this first part, but not talk about it a lot. And I say that knowing that I'll probably end up pausing and talking about it anyway. So, one of the things about this, we're in the season of Advent and approaching Christmas, or if you just call it the Christmas season, whatever you call it. This was what my family did growing up on Christmas Eve. My dad would read through Luke 2, the first 20 verses. And then, following that, we would be permitted to open one present that we would get to play with for the evening. And then we'd have to wait till Christmas morning to open the rest of them. After I met my wife, I don't know if it was right away or when it happened with going to church with her, if it was early on or not, but the church had an 11 o'clock service that ended at midnight or shortly around there, and thus it was Christmas. So with my kids growing up, that was always the service we went to, the 11 o'clock service, so that when we got home, now this is a difference in philosophy from some people. I'll just say that. We would go and take our kids to the service. They would have a nap, and we would get up. We'd dress them in pajamas. We'd go to the 11 o'clock service. Pajamas when they were younger, clothes as they got older, just the having to put them back in pajamas after you get them home if they did fall asleep and couldn't stay awake. But we would get home, and they would open all their presents because it's now Christmas Day. Here's the thing that a lot of people, I can't have my kids up that late. Oh, that's awful, and then that'll ruin Christmas. Really? Because here's the thing: would you rather take your kids to a service at 11 o'clock at night, have them open presents, get them home, put them to bed at 1:30 when they're now tired and asleep, and not have your kids wake you up at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning saying it's Christmas Day and we need to open presents, and having to get up and get out of bed early? So there's the blessing in it. You open the presents and the kids go to sleep and you go to sleep, and even if the kids wake up at 4 or 5 again, they already have all their toys that they just got. They can go play with them, and you don't have to get woken up by the kids. We always had a rule: you can't come in mom and dad's bedroom and wake us up before this time on the clock. And we, whatever time it was, it changed maybe as age of the kids or where we lived, things like that. But no, it's not allowed, not because anything's happening in there, but because you do not have the right, unless it's an emergency, to come wake me up just because you're awake. That was kind of our thought behind it. So anyway, a whole aside there, because coming from talking about why in the world would you, or why are we going to read through this even if that's not my focus? So, all right, so I'll try to briefly go through Luke 2 here. So, In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to be registered. Welcome, Raiders. I saw you come in there. I was just finishing the sentence where I was at. So good to see you here. Caught part of the stream over there. So hope you are all having a blessed day. And we were talking about cookies and donuts. I wish I had some this morning to welcome or taunt you with, either way. But I do have my tea this morning, and so welcome in. Thanks for being here. Hope you can stay for a little bit, or at least the time you're here, that you find something blessed in this. So, ukulele, you had read through Luke 2 here, and as I'm going to get to the starting at verse 21, I thought I would just go ahead and try to quickly read through this section and not comment on it, and then we'll pick up at verse 21. So we'll try to do that. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn and wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Now, if you're used to a different translation, there are reasons why things are translated differently here. I do happen to, when it comes to occasions like this, do like the King James because it's what I heard as a kid, and so it's ingrained in the telling of the story in some way. So I do like that. So if this sounds different and that's what you're used to, that would be why. Or if you just know the Charlie Brown Christmas, that would be the King James there as well. I'm going to keep moving or else I'll get sidetracked and make a bunch of comments. And there were shepherds living in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find the babes wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Not anticipating, just quick side, that there are probably a lot of babies laying in mangers. So finding the baby lying in a manger would be, we might think, the sign. But as I was mentioning earlier, these strips of cloth would have been the cloth that was used for wrapping sheep that would have ended up being the sacrificial lamb at Passover. So that's part of what might be the sign. Not a sign that this is the baby, but a sign that this is the Messiah. So it's which direction are you connecting? The sign that this is the right baby, or the sign that he is the Messiah, the Lord? So it depends on how you're connecting. So I won't go into further of that. Yeah, you like the King James reading too. Like I said, I only do in a couple of places where I have them so ingrained in my memory that that's what I automatically do to. If I'm studying otherwise, I do prefer others. I think in the familiar stories of Christmas and Easter, that comes about, and then probably when I go to the Psalms as well, there's just more poetic carryover in the King James than there is in modern English. We've sacrificed the poetry for the translation, in my opinion, and a lot of translations. So back to our reading. Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." Interesting thing there. They're not told to. They decide to, though. So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread word concerning what had been told to them about the child, and all who heard it were amazed what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. So that's normally where we stop the Christmas story. Now, depending upon your tradition, you now will probably jump to another passage and maybe jump over to Matthew and look about the wise men, but that's not what we find here in Luke. There are no wise men. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's not Luke's intent or Luke's purpose. Why does Matthew include it? Because it aligns with his purpose of telling the story. So here's where we're going to pick up our reading, is here in verse 21. And this is where I'm going. I want to go in a direction that we don't often hear. I think one of the things that we do is we get so familiar with something that we don't learn anything new. We think we know everything there is to know about it. Then that means that we're not growing, we're not expanding, we're not doing things that we should be, perhaps with our faith. We think there's everything. Hey, Alice, welcome in, friend. We're in Luke 2 here, and we just finished the traditional. Oh, I'm pretty quiet. Okay, I can turn it up a little bit. Let me know if that's better. I always have that struggle because my microphone picks up every little tapping on my keyboard. So if I have it too high, it picks up too much ambient noise. And so, okay, good. I'm glad that's better. Now you'll probably hear my mouse clicking, or me pick up and set down my mug. I'll try not to slurp. So we finished what is the traditional Christmas story in the book of Luke, and we're going to continue the story there, and that's what I want us to see. Yeah, but at least you'll hear me. Okay, that's good. On the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise the child, he was called Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he was conceived. Okay, this is maybe not something that people know. Circumcision in the Old Testament is commanded, and it is sign. Yeah, this is Luke 2. I'm sorry, I thought I said it. Luke 2, so we're starting in verse 21. Yeah. So in order to be a child of the covenant, the parents would take and circumcise on the 8th day. Now, there's others throughout the Old Testament that come in later. Circumcision had to happen, but if you were doing this as a parent to proclaim and claim God's promises, you did it on the 8th day. And so then that would be a part of claiming the promises of God. And also, it was on the 8th day that you named people. Now, this may or may not entirely tie into that thought and tradition and the naming piece, but I think, if I remember correctly, there is a connection here. So if you look through creation, there's a couple of thoughts here on how you do time. There's the 7 days of creation, and so then there's the thought that God rested. He's still resting, so we're still in the 7th day. Or there's the thought that God rested on the 7th day, and then everything after that is actually the 8th day in which we're living. But anyway, in that case, the naming of the animals happened on the 7th day. Adam and Eve have a child. That child's the 8th day. So there's some of that. So there's this proper thing of the completion and the Sabbath being the 7th day. Then you do things on the 8th day at times. So and maybe I'm confusing or mixing a couple of those things or mingling them in some way. But there's where this shows up later with the commands to circumcise on the 8th day and naming took place at the same time. Well, it depends on eighth day if you think that Sunday is the seventh day, or if you think Saturday is the seventh day. And so, by Jewish thinking, Sunday is the first day of the week, Saturday is the last, and then there, people debate over that further on. So, anyway, yeah. Oh, you have to head back to work, or you're just saying Monday's back to work. So there's a naming thing that happened. So if we were to focus on all the stuff that's already happened, there is this whole thing of Luke, and if we were to read Matthew's accounts, this declaring of things that the people of Israel would have known. And so they're weaving in parts of things from the Old Testament into the story of things that are essential for Jesus to be and become the Messiah, to be the one. So that's where some of the stuff that's already in the text happens. There's also this, that he is following the Jewish rites, traditions, and things. Oh, you do go back to work on Sunday. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes. The Jewish people would. Yeah. If you 6 days you labor. Yeah. Sunday you go back to work. Okay. Gotcha. So the circumcision is the first piece there. The naming thing is the second piece there, and then we get into the next piece where it continues. So it says, when the time came for the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or two young pigeons. So, because he's the firstborn, which is specified in the text in several places, there's also another piece that takes place. So, he not only is circumcised on the eighth day, he not only is named on the eighth day, he then, when the time is the right time to go and have the purification ritual, he and his parents take him to the temple because he is the firstborn, and they make the appropriate sacrifice for him. Why? So that he has fully fulfilled the law. And we'll see that later when Jesus makes the claim and says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So there's the fulfilling of the law here, where he is consecrated to God as the firstborn. Not just the firstborn of Mary and Joseph, but the firstborn of all creation. So there's that thing. And so what was required was a small sacrifice, a couple of doves and pigeons. Why? To honor and praise God. Now, I could probably dig up more things that are symbolized in the doves and pigeons, but I think that's more aside than we probably need for this discussion right here. So this is what Mary and Joseph are expecting and planning to do. He's been born. They do the circumcision. They do the naming. There's power in naming. And notice that they don't give a family name. This would have been a surprise probably to relatives. We don't have anyone named Yeshua. That would have been the Hebrew, a Hebrew or Aramaic form of that word, which we translate as Jesus, which would have been in the Old Testament what we would translate as Joshua. So Jesus, Joshua, same root, same Greek, Hebrew, variations, Aramaic, those kinds of things. But we get Joshua, which we have a lot of people named, but Jesus we have few people named. Those kinds of. So the name comes from the angel, not from the family lineage. So that's a distinction there. It's also a signification of obedience, and it was the name given before conception took place. Don't know if there's anything crucial or critical there, but just giving a reminder of, hey, this name came before the conception took place. So, all right, before I go on, I see there was some comments. In the Old Testament, with animal sacrifice, wasn't birds the poor person sacrifice? Yes, there in some instances, yes, but in consecration, it was also used. So, like richer people, higher status, did goats, lambs, bulls. It depends on which sacrifice you're talking about. Here, the sacrifice is a consecration sacrifice, so there wasn't a requirement for a larger animal and then there's if you want to read, and I find it fascinating. It's not something I preach on often though. Is the book of Leviticus goes through all kinds of sacrifices, and this is where if we don't know that there's all kinds of sacrifices, we get confused when we read into other passages. Like I've heard people wrongly think that the reason that Cain's sacrifice wasn't accepted is because it wasn't an animal sacrifice. No, because in the book of Leviticus, there's commands for there to be grain sacrifices, and for there to be sacrifices of everything that you would have. Your first fruits of the harvest, you would come and bring that. You would also bring your firstborn lamb. So there's also pouring out of wine. Wine would be, or oil. Those would all be things you would sacrifice and give to God. Now, then a portion of those would end up being used or utilized by the priests and the Levites for because they're not actually growing anything. So portions of all those sacrifices would sustain the workers in temple and temple worship. Oh yeah, no, I don't want to read Leviticus again. Yes, there were different. Yeah, I'm only bringing it up because it sometimes we get so fixated. I want to say this as Christians and not having grown up with a knowledge of all of the sacrificial system that everyone would have when Jesus came, that we don't know and understand, nor do we practice any of these animal sacrifices, even or grain sacrifices or other things of that nature. So we just think the only sacrifice that's acceptable to God is the blood sacrifice that Jesus makes. And that's true in the sense of blood sacrifices are the only ones that cover sin. That's not true in all other sacrifices. They're all other giving that would take place. So anyway, let's jump back into our text. So I was pointing out, so up to this point, all the things that have taken place are what Mary and Joseph intended to do and planned to do. And now what takes place is unexpected on their part. It is God divine appointments. That's my phrase for it. So let's read that. Now there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon, who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. Moved by the Spirit, he went to the temple courts. When the parents brought in the child, Jesus, to do for him what was what the custom of the law required, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, now I'm going to stop before I read what he said. So that's why I'm saying this is a divine appointment, because look at what it says. He lives in Jerusalem. Okay. He's a devout and righteous person. Okay. He has been promised that he is going to see the Lord's Messiah before he dies. Why? Why does God do this? So maybe we'll see that in the declaration he says. But let's just say, why is he promised that? Something in his life, in his devoutness to God, maybe he had prayed in regards to wanting to see the Messiah before his death, to know the fulfillment was on the way. Maybe there's something, we don't know that, but there's a possibility. But like I said, we'll look at what he says, and as the story continues, maybe there's other clues there. But I think that's certainly a possibility, because the Holy Spirit reveals to him that he's going to see the Lord's Messiah. And then when Jesus, Joseph, and Mary are headed to the temple, the Holy Spirit says, now's the time to go. And when he sees the parents bringing the child in, there has to be something in that also prompts him. It doesn't tell us here in the text. It just says when the parents brought in the child, that he took him in the arms. Is he doing this for every child? I don't think so. I think he's doing it specifically for Jesus and Jesus alone, because if he was doing it for others, maybe the marveling wouldn't be there that we'll see. It says they marveled at what took place. So here is what he says. Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, You may now dismiss your servant in peace. That's the first thing. He thanks God for fulfilling the promise that he had. And now I have peace. Now, I'm not going to dive into what he's thinking that peace is. We get totally sidetracked there. For my eyes have seen your salvation. Salvation, Yeshua. Your salvation. Play on words there. Well, also significant, not just entirely play on words. Which you have prepared in the sight of all nations. Wow. Really? All nations? This in the sight of that nobody else knows. This is happening. Herod hasn't sent out all the soldiers to hunt down baby Jesus in sight of all. No one knows this. What does he mean? Well, there's a few things he could mean. He could be speaking into the future, and this is the part that's prepared in the sight of all nations, and they will see it once it's culminated. Okay, or prepared in the sight of that. Here's where it starts. So there's a couple of things, but it's just a fascinating thought to think through. It's prepared in the sight of all nations, and none of them are paying attention. A light for revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. That is a fascinating thing to have mentioned here. And there's two things about this. In our thinking, I'll just say that, not necessarily Jewish thinking, but in our thinking, wouldn't you think that Israel would be mentioned first? Because he is the promised Savior for the people of Israel. So wouldn't he mention Israel first? And then, but there's a second thought, not for us, but for the Jewish people hearing this. Why would he mention the Gentiles? And we realize that the Gentiles are a part of this because most of us are Gentiles and we have the New Testament. But here, at the beginning of the New Testament, there is this declaration of to the Gentiles that's taking place. And where does it take place? In the temple itself. There's the first, well, maybe not the first, but there is a clear declaration here in the temple that the light, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of the people of Israel is made here. Yeah. A good question. Why are the Gentiles mentioned, and why is it mentioned here? If we had time and we wanted to, and we go back to the Abrahamic covenant, what the people forget along the way at times is that there's the promise of I will bless all that bless you, and I will curse all that curse you, and all the nations on earth will be blessed through you. So there's where all the nations come in, and then here the Gentiles, there should be an echoing of the Gentiles being all the nations, because there's only Israel and Gentiles. So all nations, it's prepared both for the people of God, the sons of and daughters of Abraham, and it's prepared for the whole world because they are all children of God, created by God. Now, I don't mean children of God in the sense that they're following him, but just in the sense that he has created them. So distinction there in case anyone wants to in some way think I'm saying something about universalism, which I am not. So, but yeah, the fact that this was remembered, I think in some ways is because it was striking and different than perhaps was expected. Also, I think there's just so many things that are happening around who Jesus is and his coming. I mean, we have the earlier, and Mary treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart. I think these stories are repeatedly told throughout the whole family. That's why Luke is able to go and find these, because he can go to brothers and sisters of Jesus, maybe James, and ask about these. And he's going to know all the stories that mom told. And that probably growing up annoyed him as the younger brother of good old Jesus. And I say that just as a younger brother of my sister. Yeah, okay, great. Wonderful stories. Glad to hear that. What about me? Where's the story about me? So anyway, let's keep moving our or we'll get perhaps stuck here for a little bit longer. But anyway, so this whole declaration of first praising God for keeping the promise, second, for what he actually saw, Jesus, and who he is and what he's going to do, and then third, who he is for. So just really cool things happening there. So then continuing, the child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. So what was said about him? That he is the salvation for all nations. I'm just going to summarize it that way. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. I'm just laughing at your comment there, Alice. Why can't you be more like your brother? I had an older sister. I had a younger brother and a younger sister. So it was an older sibling, but it wasn't a brother. So it wasn't usually be more like, but yeah, that's a common thought. So I want to point out here, notice they marveled at what he said already about Jesus. Now he gives them a blessing, but I don't know if we totally have the blessing, because this is what he says. Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, this child is dead. So now, after a blessing, in some ways, this is, I don't want to say a warning necessarily, but just perhaps something to remember. Maybe that's a good way. A memorial thought that as things happen, as he grows up, once he starts his ministry, and notice he only says it to Mary. Not that Joseph doesn't get to hear this, but as we go through the text, there is the assumption, because Joseph is not married, not mentioned after the scene further in Luke of Jesus at age 12. There is no longer Joseph on the scene. There's mention of, isn't he the son of Joseph, but there's never mention of Joseph being in the story. So the assumption is he's dead. Historically, that's what the church has thought and taught. But I just want to say, since the text doesn't clearly identify his death, that it's assumed, and I think accurately. But I just want to say it. So perhaps here, he only says this part to Mary, because it only implies to her. Joseph wouldn't be around, so he would not see the falling and rising of many in Israel. And he would not see that it's going to be a sign spoken against, so that the hearts of people will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your soul too. So let's take that last part first, and we'll go back. So the sword will pierce your heart, your soul too. How? Witnessing his death, witnessing what people do to him, witnessing what happens around him. I mean, I can't imagine any parent not having their soul pierced by what happens to Jesus, and by lesser things than what Jesus endures. So I think that's what that last piece is that remember these words, and not only these, but the blessings, that who he is and why he's come when that happens. So the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that is spoken against, so that the thoughts and hearts of many are revealed. So the signs that he does, what do the scribes and Pharisees and teachers of the law often say about him, or occasionally make arguments about? Well, he cast out evil spirits by the power of Beelzebul. It's one of the things they say. They accuse him of being in cahoots with the devil. And what do they eventually accuse him of? They accuse him of being blasphemous. So he is spoken against. The signs and things that he does, the rising and falling, and it shows the hearts of people. What more heart could there be revealed in the heart of Judas, who betrays him? His heart's revealed. In the end, his heart's revealed. What about Peter? Is his heart revealed? Yeah, in some sense, maybe it is when he denies him, or maybe it's more of a fear, and his heart's revealed when Jesus restores him. Think about that either way. I'm not going to say that, but I'm just going to say through the whole process, many hearts are revealed. What about the heart of Nicodemus, who comes to him secretly in the night? What about the heart of Joseph of Arimathea, who offers his own tomb to bury him? What about the women who come to the tomb to anoint him? The hearts of many are revealed through him. So this is just a fascinating story. I know that some people, when they do their Christmas things, do include Simeon. Church I was at, that they did a walkthrough nativity kind of thing with different scenes. They included Simeon as one of the first scenes, which was really kind of cool because he's not often included, but he talks about having seen and witnessed it. And so, yeah, that's a cool thing that happened for Mary and Joseph. And here's another piece about that. If you think about having to raise a child who is going to be who Jesus is, and then Mary witness what he has to suffer, you're going to need and hold on to every reminder of God. And here they get to witness what? They get to witness someone who had a promise of God, who has to wait a very long time until, well, he's very old. We don't know how old. We don't know how long he lives after this. We don't have that piece of the story. But let's just say the promise was that he was going to see the Messiah before he died. He gets to do it. So there's a long wait. We don't know how long the wait was between the promise and the fulfillment. I'm going to guess a long time, just because I think that makes a significant piece into the story. So the promise happens. The promise is fulfilled. So Mary and Joseph, remember all those promises that you hear from the angels. When the angels came, both to Mary and Joseph, we've got two stories about that. Remember about what was declared when the shepherds came. You'll remember when the wise men came. You'll remember what Simeon says. We haven't got to Anna yet. You'll remember what she has to say. And so in the future, you'll be able to say, God keeps his promises. So anything that was a promise in all this, we had and were witness to someone who was in our presence declaring things, and at the same time having his promise fulfilled to him by God. So there's this whole layering of things happening in this that we may not fully see or pay attention to always because, well, Jesus doesn't do much in this part of the story, so we just pass on. We just move along, keep moving, Simeon. Yeah, thank you for all that blessing. Move along. Your time is up. Your 15 minutes of fame. Let's move on. And let's get to Anna so that we can then get back to Mary and Joseph and Jesus. I don't want to do that. I want to spend time with Simeon. And now we'll move on to Anna and try to spend a little time with Anna. So continuing in verse 36 here. There was also a prophet, Anna, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was very old. Okay, let me see. What did it describe Simeon? Devout man, revealed to him. He would not die before he'd seen the Messiah. Okay, so doesn't say how old he is, but we can assume he's old. But here, it is very old. You know what? Let's just take an aside for a minute. 36, Luke 2. I'm going to look over here at the Hebrew a second. Or, sorry, Greek, I should say, not Hebrew. See what word is used there for... okay, should not see death. I'm going to guess that. Holy Ghost, you should not see death. Thanatos, okay, yeah. Figured it was that. So not much there, but let's see what word is described in Anna. What verse are we? It'd be easier for me to look here. 36. Oh, yes. Prophetess, this would be just the feminine form of prophet, but is a person who declares the truth of God. We could dive into that more deeply, but there are prophet in the Old Testament and there are prophetesses in the Old Testament. Certainly the prophets outnumber the prophetesses who are mentioned by name, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there weren't significant numbers of prophetess throughout the Old Testament. And it's fascinating here that there's mention of what tribe and family that she or her family there. Doesn't mention that for Simeon, but there is some accreditation here that's given to her lineage um, with her, and that would be another aside. I don't want to go into that. Okay. Multiple Strong's numbers represent the English text above. Oh, okay. So let me do this. Open that one in a new tab and open that one here. Da, da, da. Hemera, feminine noun of the derivative. Oh, they get into a little bit too much for me sometimes. The day used of the natural day and the metaphor of the day and the daytime. So, okay. On the of the last day of the present. Okay, that must not have been the word I was looking for, because I'll go back. Wrong one there. Okay, so probiano to go forward, to go on, to be well stricken, to go on further, be of age, with. Okay, so this looks like what it is. Here is a combination of words that there's difficulty in translating into English, and hence that's why they just translated very old. I thought maybe there was something in the words there. Well, I got sidetracked. So, all right. So she was very old, as opposed to Simeon, who was maybe close to death. I don't know. She had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then was widowed until she was 84. Okay, so she is either 84 at this time or she dies at 84. One of those two. So there's the very old part, and here's the 84, the specific part. And she had a husband, but it doesn't tell us what age she got married, but it tells us she never remarried. So the assumption would be she lived with her husband for 7 years. He passes away. When she becomes a widow, she goes to the temple, and this to me is fascinating. She never left the temple, but worshiped night and day, fasting and praying. I find that fascinating. So for lack or just for lack of knowledge, but also for simplicity, let's just make the assumption that, given what typically is thought of the time period, that girls were married sometime around 14 or 15, and maybe we can push this one a little bit later. So we'll just say by the time she's 24, so she's 70. So by the time she's 24, she's widowed. And until she's 84, so that'd be 60 years, and give or take, some time there, probably give a few more. So 60 years she is in the temple, and it says she never left the temple, but worshiped day and night, fasting and praying. Now, when it says never left the temple, I don't think it means a specific, like if you were to say never left the church, our minds would go to inside the building. but there was a temple court. So my thought would be more of the whole compound of the temple region and area. That, if you want to think more of a monastery and there would be a chapel within it, it would be that kind of a concept. I think would be more accurate here to say she never left and worshiped day and night. So it's not a 24 hours a day she's worshiping. No, it doesn't matter if it's day or night, she worships. And it doesn't matter if it's day or night, she fasts. And it doesn't matter if it's day or night, she's in prayer. So she worships, she fasts, and she prays. So yeah, kind of like being a nun. I think that might be a good comparison there, or a good example there. However, she's mentioned as a prophetess, so maybe a little bit more intense on some level in that regard. But maybe if you think of, because not all nuns teach at Catholic schools, but maybe a nun who is also a teacher within the community of the temple, something along those lines would probably be pretty close and accurate. But one who is spending time devoted to God and also to the people of God. So worshiping night and day and fasting and in prayer. She came up to them at that very moment. Which very moment? So the very moment that Simeon, yes, but does it mean the very moment Simeon? So Simeon comes up immediately, picks up the child, and she's there, and she witnesses all of this too? Or at the very moment at the end here where Simeon says the last thing will pierce your soul? I'm going to say there's probably something in the Greek. This is a piece where I couldn't look it up and find it, but I'm going to guess there's probably a verb agreement in case ending or something and form that would tell you exactly which one of these verbs up here is the right verb for us to know. But just thinking this through, I'm going to say I think it was at the very beginning. So the very moment Simeon comes up and begins to declare the sovereign God has promises to me, that Anna is also there as well. So coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. Okay, I hope you see this distinction here. Maybe you won't, and I've got to point it out first, but I'm going to read that last phrase again. I want you to think about what's the difference in what she is doing and what's the difference in what Simeon just did. That's what I want to ask you. This is really good because I hadn't thought about this for Sunday, but I think this is going to end up being part of my sermon. So this is really good. Thank you all for saying absolutely nothing and my brain going there. You get to witness it. So coming up to them at that very moment, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. So what's the difference in what she does and declares from what Simeon does and declares? And I'll give you I wish I had Jeopardy music at this time to do. I don't want to get kibosh here for actually playing that, but yeah, ukulele, you got the direction I was going. 5 stars there. I don't know how many stars you give out, but gold star there. His prophecy and his declaration was specific to and about Jesus and was for Mary and Joseph to hear. And her declaration of who he is for everyone. And I think if I went and looked, the form of the declaration, gave thanks and spoke here, one of the giving thanks to God or the speaking about the child probably has the Greek verb form that is a present tense carrying on into the future. I think that's called pluperfect. I get my forms all mixed up. I would guess that it's possible. You know what? I'm just going to go look. If I get lucky, I'm correct. And if I can't figure it out, oh well. But that's verse 38. So let's just go look. Does it say? This is where Pastor Brock is much better at doing this than I am. I know enough to say the wrong thing, but say it with confidence. And spake. Okay. Let's see. What is that? Leo. Leleo. What form does it tell me? Verb. Let's see, what form is it in here? Leleo down here is the imperfect third person singular. Oh, it's imperfect. So passive, present, aorist, future. No, it's not future. So it is present. Passive, present. It's not passive. Perfect. It doesn't list a. Does it not list a pluperfect form? I do not see. But it's imperfect. Um, so maybe it does contain that. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm reading into that it is the. I would think it would be clearly at that moment that she's declaring to everyone there. But since she's a prophet, my thought was that maybe she continued, or prophetess, she continued to do that. So she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Israel. Or sorry, of Jerusalem, not Israel. I sometimes just intermix those, even when I read it. So because I expand it to the whole of the people, not just the city, which um, is in Psalms at times. Jerusalem, Zion, they are a representation of the whole people, and so sometimes my mind just fills in Israel when it says Jerusalem or Zion. So, but she says this to all who are looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem. Another funny question. I like having. Well, I shouldn't say I like having. I do, but I just always have questions about things. How many people were there at the temple who were not looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem? They're like, oh man, I hope that never comes. Man, I just hope that we stay under this Roman oppression because just one good time after another, and I hope that Messiah never comes. Man, just God forgets about us. He never sends the Messiah, and we just get to be under oppression. That's just good stuff here. And even with saying that sarcastically like that, I know that there are some who benefited. I mean, Herod would have benefited from it, and we could make an argument he isn't looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem because he'd lose power, perhaps. So maybe there's some truth that some people wouldn't have, depending on their prestige and power they certainly currently have, and maybe we can make the argument there that even the Sadducees, Pharisees, and religious leaders weren't looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem because they'd lose power, but I would say they were perhaps wanting it in their own vision rather than what happened, more so than they weren't looking forward to it. So I don't couch what I'm saying to make sure that it's not just only the poor or only the regular people would be looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem, and so that's the only ones. No. That's where Anna is fascinating. And so here's another thought. If Simeon takes place and Simeon alone, there's a blessing for Mary and Joseph. Anna, however, here, it's going to highlight that. Oh, put that over it. I didn't want that. Anna here is blessing everybody else who's there. I want you to think about that. At times, are you called to bless a single person? And at times, are you called to bless a group of people? I'm not saying that's the teaching here. I'm just asking a question and saying, here's two separate examples. One is the piece of a promise fulfilled and completion and the end. And the second one is a declaration of the new going forward. And not that what Simeon says isn't that as well. I don't want to say that's not there, because there is the promise within him of what's coming. But in Simeon, there's a promise to him. There is nothing mentioned about Anna that there was any promise given to her that she would see the Messiah. She gets to, and what's her immediate response is declaration he's here to anybody that'll listen, anybody who's present. She starts declaring who he is to the people who are in the temple at the time this happens. So, yeah, ukulele. I think there's certainly truth in that. Like I said, I don't want to say the text is saying that. I'm only saying here's examples of one and here's examples of another in the text. Yeah, so some people might be called to serve groups, and others are called to serve in more personal ways. Yeah, I like how you're phrasing that, personal ways, um, because sometimes there's more one-on-one at times that we get to do with people, and we get to, I'm not saying be a part of their lives in the sense of, we're going to be friends for a long time, but in the sense of our lives and our journeys line up for a period of time, and we walk together with them either through a season or through an event, or whatever it is. We get to come alongside and do that in a personal way, and sometimes we only do things in a declarative way or in a teaching way. I mean, think about going through. Uh, I'll exclude elementary, because at elementary most of the time you have one teacher for all your subjects. But when you get to middle school or junior high, whatever you call it, or high school or college, university, you have multiple classes with specialized teachers who teach in one particular subject. And some teachers, you go to class, you listen to what they say, you turn in your work, you're polite to them, they're polite to you, and you don't know them, and you have very little to do with them. And others, from there's a relationship there. I don't want to say there's friends, but there's a relationship that builds and culminates over time because you engage one another. And so I think there's where we can make a distinction, that we can have different relationships with different kind of people. The teacher still is there teaching the whole class, and there is that dissemination to a whole group. But for some who are in that class, there is also the personal, and there's great strength when you're able to develop those personal connections and relationships uh, with anybody. So, yeah, we tend to think we have to be in leadership to make an impact, but one-on-one help is so powerful. Yeah, and well, I think one of the problems that our educational system establishes is, well, there's several, but without saying I have a way to change it. So I don't want to say there's the whole list of problems, but is this hierarchical type of thing that you gain knowledge and you get to be higher, so that in some essence we think that knowledge can only come from somebody who has studied it as opposed to somebody who engages in it. And from that, I mean, if you have a professor in university, college, they've studied it more. You don't usually have the person who's out actually doing it. So a law professor might be somebody who has continuously studied law. Maybe they went and practiced for a short term, but then they went back and did more academic study. And they're the ones that teach, as opposed to, I'll pick on somebody that's prominent in my state, that if I mentioned that, no, you know what, I'm not gonna. But let's just figure the guy that's on the TV all the time advertising, or the gal that's on, or the firm that's on all the time saying the strong arm of the law, is a common phrase I've seen in several states, or the hammer, because they're gonna bring justice. They use those phrases. That if any of one of those is in practice, we sometimes think, well, they're not somebody that we can go to learn from. If you want to learn agriculture, we've lost the thought that you could go to a farmer and learn it, and we think we go to university and get a degree in the science of it and study soil, and we study the biology of plants, and we study all of the chemical things with fertilizer and stuff, instead of go to an actual farmer and learn from grandpa, and experience things that way. We have taken and we've created a system in which we remove the relationships. Think about how great anybody had a relationship with a particular person as a child when the person spent time with you. I don't care who it is. For me, one of those people was a janitor, and part of the spending time was because when we were going to the school, my mom worked early. We got dropped off at school before school started, and the only person in the building was the janitor. I spent lots of time talking with the janitor and learning from the janitor, and he was a fantastic guy. I learned as much in elementary school from the janitor as I did from my teachers. Not anything in the sense of, well, here's what I could do with math, or here's what I could do with English, or here's what I could do with any other subject, but just learning how to engage people, how to treat people, how to those kinds of things. I learned from a janitor, and so that was really cool. So let me see what else. Comments. Give me the ban hammer, please. Yeah. You're mostly lurking. Yeah, should be bannable. That's fine. I appreciate lurks. I often lurk on people as well, because I have other things that are going on, and so I like to engage when I have a chance, and when I don't want to just say, well, I'm not going to go and have it open. I'll listen in the background, and then if something engages, it's great, as opposed to not having it. So yeah, I appreciate anybody that lurks. It's fantastic. I appreciate anybody that watches this later and not live. That's wonderful. And I also, here's the cool thing about this that I didn't anticipate with doing a Twitch stream, because I still think I'm finding my footing here, and I hope I'm getting better at it. But I have always been a verbal processor, and when I'm studying, it's very weird to verbal process when nobody else is around. Those kinds of things. So by being on Twitch and reading through the text, I get to verbal process in a way that I hear things, and I hear myself say things, and then my brain thinks things, and then I'm able to then share things that I probably might not ever come across. And so in that ways, this is fantastic for the way that my mind works. And so if that blesses you, even better. If not, it's blessing me, and it's blessing in some ways I think the sermons that I'm giving. So I'm just scrolling back through here, see what we did and didn't cover. Anything else? I don't think there's anything else, but in another sense would be really fun to do sometime would be to look at all of the fulfillment that we see in here. It's just fascinating. All the things that knowing the Old Testament promises would have been pointing to, and then seeing them happen here. The different significance of who and where things happen. Even the thoughts of things about the shepherds. Essentially, in Jewish society, those that were, shepherds could be thought of as being unclean because of the relationship of being with sheep. They would have been just above lepers and outcasts. Maybe wouldn't have been seen in the same way as tax collectors and traders, but maybe above them, kind of thinking. But they were thought as liars, and so therefore they were not permissible to be witnesses in court. I love this thought. Who does Jesus show up to at his birth? People who have no standing in the court of law. Isn't that cool? He's not here to stand up in a court of law and prove it. Who then, let me just point this out. The resurrection, who does he show up first to? Women. Another group who has no standing in a court of law. So that's where he starts, with those with no standing in society. That's where he starts. There's also the possibility, um, well, certainly shepherds were usually the youngest in the family, would be the shepherd. So as you got older, you got to do different things within the family besides care for the sheep. But they also, in some families, would be women would be the shepherds, or the girls would be shepherds. So the shepherds in this story, I know we picture them with big scruffy beards and old scruffy guys. More likely, they were young kids, and there's a possibility that they were girls. So I'm not saying there were, I'm saying there's a possibility, and very likely they were young teenagers, and possibly there could have been girls among the group that was shepherds in the fields. So just, I think that's fascinating. Who does God show up to? The people that society does not appreciate or like. Who sees the signs and comes and finds him is on the other side of it, which we didn't look at, which would be the wise men. So those who are studying and looking for him. Okay, you're not done with your page, but or your homework paper, but most of it done. I've got about 8 more pages to do left. Wow, 8 more pages. I remember writing some long pages, and I'm glad that that is not something I'm currently working on and doing. Um, yeah, that can cause stress and other things. So, anyway, we're gonna get off here. I think that unless anyone has something else that I did not cover or go over, we can go and raid someone. So, anyone have suggestions on who we could go raid? Oh, a fine arts master's course. Okay, I didn't know it was fine arts. I knew you were doing a study. That's. Do you know what you're going to do with the fine arts degree, or is it continuing of stuff you're already doing and you're going back to get more? Oh, it's a lot more intense than you thought. All right. Anyway, anyone have suggestions on who we can go raid? We've got 5 viewers. We can go bless somebody. Of those, I usually go raid. The lift is the only one that I see on, and I know I raided him last week or the last couple of weeks. I do see that Jono is on. I know that's a friend or someone that Pastor Brock has raided frequently. I really don't know Jono that well. Um, well, cool. Go into teaching or freelance opportunities. Yeah, yeah. I'm more getting into that thought process of the freelancer. I kind of like that kind of thought. Oh, a couple of Christmas playlist stations. Yeah, do you have a suggestion there of who? Oh, you'd vote the lift? Okay, we can do that. Like I said, I just was trying to look for an alternative because I know I frequently raid him, and not that that's a bad thing, but I'm always open to others. All right, well, we'll go ahead and raid the lift. I like him. So so that's good. It's always good to raid, and I know I get raided by the same people too. So I guess I can pass it on and raid the same people in the other direction. I thought that, well, and I haven't actually um, caught Delker in a while. I know he used to be on Fridays at 10 and Mondays, so I'll have to go check out what his schedule is because I haven't rated him in a while and I haven't caught his channel in a while. I've been busy. I think the same issue. I'm on 1 day a week, so people. Oh, he moved to Monday, Thursday. Okay, okay, that's why I haven't caught him. So he was on yesterday. I didn't realize that. Okay, and I haven't. I've been having things keeping me busy on Mondays, so I haven't watched a lot on Monday. All right, well, we'll go raid the lift, and I think after the first of the year, and I might start it sooner, I'm going to try to be on a lot more. So, but what I'm going to probably do is vary my schedule so that it's not the same every day, so that I can perhaps on some days of the week raid someone. On another day of the week, that person could raid me. Those kinds of things. That's what I'm thinking of. So if you have thoughts or suggestions on that, just whisper me. I don't have Discord yet or anything, so that'd be the best way. Just whisper me, and I'll take that into consideration and try to figure out a schedule going forward, and we'll go from there. So, request for Sunday. Yes, I definitely, Alice, want to do something on Sunday. Give me a suggestion of what time. I don't know if it will work. And put what time zone. That'll help me. So if it's Greenwich Mean Time, I'll be able to calculate where I'm at and figure out the time. So if there's a specific time on Sunday that works, I will try to figure that out and make that work. So, can I wear a flat cap when I preach, please? Well, actually, I had a thought. I had started a pub theology group before COVID started, and I've been trying to think through rejoining and doing that. And so I might try to bring my Twitch stream into the brewery to be able to do that, have myself on or have the whole group there. I'll need a moderator who can moderate what's happening, and I'll have it on the screen so I can read or comments that are coming in there. I'm not sure. That's a thought in some way, and I would keep my hat on there. But when I preach, virtual pub, Friday night party. Well, actually, we were talking about doing that possibly on Sundays, do the church at the pub, so to speak. So